home as well. Now, Katie Taylor knows all about it, but how important is mental preparation for hurling and football? Can it be the difference between winning and losing, or is it all just mind games? Performance psychologist Caroline Currid has helped Tyrone, Tipperary and Dublin win All-Irelands in recent years, and she knows the power of positive thinking.
Sport is only partly about ability, fitness and talent. Rising to the top means putting in long hours of physical and mental preparation. The difference in ability between top inter-county teams is very small. The edge in the mindset is enough to enable one team to exceed the achievement of others to an almost unbelievable degree. When two teams are roughly equal in all other qualities, an attitude of positive expectancy makes the difference in that winning performance. Psychological preparation needs to be taken as seriously as physical preparation. All top teams are working on the mindset from the beginning of their season. I don't believe it's possible to succeed if you don't train the mind as well as you train the body. There is no such thing as a player just having a bad day. There are always reasons behind the bad performance, and usually it is because a player has overthought the game. No matter how much physical preparation you put in, if performance anxiety sets in, your body is not going to perform. When you overthink the game or you think negatively, your body tightens and your body gets tired. When your body gets tight, your legs get heavy because the blood stops flowing into them. Your brain shuts down to 1/3 of its capability and the blood stops flowing into the correct areas. The only part of your brain that is active is your emotional brain. You lose focus and you make mistakes. When a player is under pressure, they are most vulnerable to those negative thoughts. But some guys never show signs that they are under pressure, like Stephen Cluxton taking the last kick of the game in the All-Ireland final last year.
With the angle about 45 metres. Here he comes to win the All-Ireland. Cluxton, he's put it over the bar! Cluxton, the hero!
99% of players would have crumbled under that pressure. His mindset was fantastic. He said to himself, if I score, we win. If I don't, we draw. No big deal. Previously, Galway's inconsistency would have suggested there is a gap in their mindset. So did Anthony Cunningham work on this part of their game? Their semi-final against Cork this Sunday will tell the tale. Jim McGuinness has spent huge time on Donegal's mindset, and look at the difference in that team over the last 2 years. Attitude is everything. Under pressure, you can perform up to 30% better or 30% worse, depending on your mindset. And that is the difference between winning and losing.
Paul, do you believe that training the mind is as important as skill training?
Well, Pat, there's various versions and opinions out there, but my own opinion would be that the GAA pie at the moment has been kind of invaded by outside agencies. Okay, you have the strength and conditioning that's come in the last couple of seasons and it's gotten bigger year on year. We now have the psychology side of things coming in, and I think it is affecting for certain the skill level. I can only speak for hurling, I don't know much about Gaelic football, but it's definitely affecting the skill level of the hurling. Go back a couple of years ago, I'd say maybe hurling was split 50-50 with conditioning and strength training, but now I think the skills of the game are being pushed further and further down the line, and I think the game is suffering because of it.
You're a sceptic?
I believe in some of it. I definitely believe there is performance, things you can do to increase performance, but I don't think that you can actually get a guy at a certain level to come up to the very top if he doesn't have the ability or the skill to get there.
Well, Kieran, you're working as a sports psychologist with Mayo, and obviously it's going well there in the last 4 of the All-Ireland. Obviously there are fellas like Paul Flynn in the Mayo camp, so how do you convince a sceptic like Paul that you will work?
Well, to me it's kind of the study of winning, and let's say I personally come from a sports journalism background as well, and often you just tell them about the stories of guys who were in similar circumstances about where they are at that point where you meet them and to where they want to go. So to me, it's a great discipline, let's say sports psychology, to help it's basically the study of performance, and as I said, of winning. Like, to take up Paul's point, I don't think it's taken away from the core group. I mean, I saw Declan Ryan give a comment a couple of months ago saying that he finds players are way mentally tougher than they were even in his time finishing up in 01. And actually the skill level in hurling has gone up. I think it complements, it's how it complements the whole thing. Like, one of the big things that we work on is showing guys to develop the skills. I mean, to set goals, how to actually practice. I mean, someone like yourself and Paul were brilliant practicers, but that's not particularly common. So one of the things that we set our guys on is how they practice outside when they're with the group, and also then how they practice on their own. So it complements us and enhances the other aspects. It's not compartmentalised, and it's certainly not detracting it, not from my experience, if it's done properly.
Now, would all the top teams, inter-county football and hurling teams, have psychologists now working with them?
I don't think so. But I think it's interesting that you look at the teams. I'll put it to you this way, I don't think Kerry or Kilkenny have anybody in.
We could do with one this week.
Possibly, but I mean, those guys have been great and hugely mentally tough through
A lot
years.
of it, Kieran, is to do with the manager's attitude towards
Absolutely.
sports psychologists.
Absolutely.
Like, from my own experience of managers, some managers wouldn't like to bring them in because he might lose control, or the players might trust this person more than they trust the manager, and that the manager is in control of everything. So therefore, like, I mean, is he slipping? Is this fella kind of going behind his back, or is he?
Paul's exactly right. I mean, let's say, look, to take up the point, the teams that have beaten Kerry and have beaten Kilkenny have had someone in pretty much full time, but the key is how they align themselves with the manager. Like, I'm very lucky to be working with someone like James Horan. Jim McGuinness is a psychologist himself. Caroline worked with the Dubs and Mickey Hart. So they were appreciative, and they said they dovetail nicely, because you do get the case of either they're resistant to bringing in someone on the mental side of things, or they feel
they don't believe themselves that
they don't believe in it.
Gavin, have you had experience of sports psychologists?
No, not really, I suppose. And any experience I've had, I felt that the psychologist wasn't afforded the time to do it. And I think that's where it falls down, you know, that a lot of managers will experiment in that, and they'll bring her in maybe for a session here or there, but to actually leave them do their work and leave them spend the time, I suppose. And I suppose only from looking at Liam Sheedy, I know they used Caroline a lot, but she was left to do her job, and I think it made a huge difference with him.
Could Limerick do with a sports psychologist?
What do you think, Pat?
Well, I'm asking you, Gavin. I'll sit back.
I think, like you touched on there, Kerry and Kilkenny, these teams haven't needed psychologists in the last couple of years. They're setting the bar. They have set the bar. Limerick need every small little thing and every small break like that. So if a psychologist is the answer, I think there's definitely positives to be taken out of it.
Kieran, are some counties mentally stronger than others?
Well, the first thing to be said about is that mental strength isn't something you either have or you haven't. I mean, a lot of the teams that are now seen to be mentally tough were at a certain point of time considered to be mentally weak. I mean, you take, I remember the Armagh, before they made the breakthrough in 02, were considered to be the Croker Chokers when they drew to Sligo.
Donegal.
Yeah, exactly. Tyrone. I mean, you take even the teams now that are in the last four. You had on a weekend in June 2010, Donegal were hammered by Armagh, and Mayo were beaten by Longford. The Dubs the following day were beaten by Meath, conceding 5 goals, and Cork were coming off having lost to Kerry again in Munster. And you look at what those teams have gone on to do since. A huge part of it is the mindset that has changed. They've become mentally strong between having various practitioners in, but also the attitude of the manager. And again, as the boys say, it has to be integration with the whole programme. That helps hugely. That absolutely is huge. And also the other thing that a Kerry player, let's say someone Kerry, I remember interviewing Aidan O'Mahony a few years ago, and Aidan was talking about how nervous he was the morning of the 2004 All-Ireland. Himself and Gavin hardly slept. Yeah. And Ger O'Keefe met them the morning in the lobby, and they said, Maris didn't sleep in '97 in the final, and look at how he played. They can call on that whole collective experience. I wouldn't be precious about whether it's sports psychology is the discipline they get it from. I mean, I interviewed Katie Taylor last year. She says, I don't believe in sports psychologists. The most important thing is you believe in mental preparation. The Bible, as she said, is her sports psychology manual. She reads that at a certain time in the day beforehand. You can call that affirmation, visualising, positive self-talk. She's doing the thing. And between Billy Walsh, Zora Antia, and her father, Peter, they're using the whole principles of sports psychology without her having to deal directly with it. I mean, your own book, I remember learning a lot from it. I don't think you ever dealt with a sports psychologist. Christy Ring is one of the best sports psychology books I ever read.
Why?
Because he had the mindset. He was so open to new ideas and how he learned to deal with the big occasion. His whole process of I remember him like at 38 years of age when Jimmy Doyle came on the scene, and he said, "You see the way this young Doyle is taking the frees? I must integrate that into my game." He was always looking. He always did. He reviewed every game.
That's funny, Kieran. I remember I bought the Bob Rotella book. The secret that helped me score frees because things weren't going so well.
Right.
But the message in his book is like clear your mind of doubt and clear your mind of fear. But the last thing that you think of is more than likely the last thing you'll do. Like for a golfer's point of view, Pat, it was like don't miss right or don't put it in the water. The minute you say don't,
Same for a free taker.
well, it put me off track for a while because I kind of went through a stage of don't miss. When I went back to my old way then of 3 little things of steps during the process of taking the free, I felt it much easier.
Yeah.
Now, that's only my own experience.
No, well, that's huge.
And he says then, like, to narrow down your target. Like, I mean, for a golfer, it would be a 3 or something. And then I started picking out people in the crowd, and obviously those people were moving when I turned my face because I was missing my frees.
Watford, the team were part of, they've often been accused of mental frailty. Is that a fair point?
I thought that might come up. We were beaten.
We think of all the good questions here.
We were beaten in 5 semi-finals and a quarter-final in Croke Park. And people said, "Oh, Waterford are chokers. They can't win a match in Croke Park. They can only win a game in Thurles." But the fact of the matter is, we played better teams in Croke Park. Like, I mean, the Cork team we played were going for 3 in a row. The Kilkenny team we played did 3 in a row, and the first Kilkenny team were going for 3 in a row as well. So they're probably 2 of the best hurling teams that have played certainly in the last 30 years. And we were unfortunate enough to come against 2 teams. We could beat Cork and Munster and couldn't get over them in Croke Park. But there was no mental frailty going to Croke Park. There's no problem with the pitch, the preparation or the surroundings.
Yeah, well, there's a bit of that because
maybe individual.
I believe that team have shown great mental toughness in many regards, like commitment alone, the way that they kept coming back and consistency. You take like when they made the breakthrough in 02 in Munster, which was a huge mental barrier to break through, and a lot of that was because of the skills that, let's say, Justin would have emphasised, and that was a huge source of confidence for them. I know that talking to them through the years that lads felt maybe they weren't fit enough in 02, and that comes when the doubt is in there in the last 20 minutes. In 04, you kind of address that. You could say that you were just a little bit short on it, but I think it's, people say either you're mentally tough or you're mentally weak. There's various degrees of it, and the reality is that was the mentally toughest one.
But you can be a mentally weak player on a good team and get carried through and get away with it and end up with a bag full of medals, you know, and unfortunately.
A topic we'll have to return to again. Okay, well, there probably weren't any psychologists in the dressing room the last time Cork and Galway met in an All-Ireland semi-final way back in 1985. But as Noel Lane remembers, it turned out to be a classic.
We were kind of an up-and-coming team, whereas Cork were All-Ireland champions. They were coming to Croke Park expecting to win. We were coming to Croke Park with nothing to lose. It was an awful wet day. I mean, it rained all morning. It was atrocious underfoot conditions. And we went out on the pitch and seeing how bad it was, you know, you kind of felt as well an ease of mind that, look, if things don't go well for me today, well, I can blame the conditions.
Look at that water.
With young lads coming on the block, we older fellas decided that we'd give them good examples. So we actually gave up the drink that year. We gave it up on the Tuesday night before the match. I think we had our last feed of bacon and cabbage on the Thursday. So, you know, we were showing good example to the younger fellas and leadership in that. Cyril Farrell came back into management and he brought back a younger brigade with him. Basically, it was a new team. So we really didn't know what to expect from the younger fellas. From a very early stage, you could see that the Pete Finnertys and the Tony Keady's and the Joe Cooney's and all of these guys were up for it. It was a right tough, hard game, and both sets of players just lied into it. It was helter-skelter, hammer and tongs up and down the field, and that's the way it was from start to finish. I felt after about 15 minutes that when Cork got the goal and we got the goal back and pint for pint and we went ahead, and you could see that they weren't flying on all cylinders. You could feel that maybe they came into the game a little bit complacent and maybe underestimated the challenge from Galway at the time, and you could sense that.
A high ball in towards the goal line. A goal! And the goal went in, then the goal the other.
We felt at half time we were really in the game and had a great chance of pulling off a surprise here.
And there goes the half-time whistle. And listen to the satisfaction of the crowd.
I think they upped their game in the second half.
Oh, a lovely dropping ball in towards the goal mouth. No!
Goals generally happen on days like that where you have tough conditions.
Lovely count. He lifts it. Goal! Joe Cooney keeps it in play across the goal mouth. John County touches the wrist. Goal! Goal!
Then I was involved with PJ Malloy in a kind of a 1-2 coming in from the wing, giving it to Malloy, Malloy giving it back to me, and a few extra steps.
Into the steps to PJ Malloy. Malloy into Lane. Lane in front of the goal. He can't miss. He hasn't missed. No Lane pressing the ball into the net after a superb passing move.
Cork never really gave up and came back from being 7 or 8 points down and came back and brought it to a one-score match.
He passed from the shot. Benton missing the ball there.
He didn't connect properly with the ball. If he had, it would have been buried in the net. And at that stage, I think if they had got that goal and brought it level, they would probably have gone on and won the game.
And the Galway mentors, they're dancing with glee. They don't need music. They see it out there in front of them. And Galway have won the All-Ireland semi-final in the sensational upset of the year.
I believe that that was an outstanding game of hurling under the conditions. And it will always remain in my mind, and I'm sure in all of Galway people's minds and our supporters that travelled and didn't travel, has been an outstanding performance. What I found most rewarding about that game was that, you know, that you could see that we were back, that Galway were back, and that, okay, it took us a couple of years to ultimately win in All-Ireland, but the seeds were sown that day.
There's the man who did his bit, no Lane.
The great Noel Lane there. Believe it or not, lads, there was only 8,000 people at that All-Ireland semi-final. Gavin, you were saying before the show that you weren't even born when that game was played. Hurling has changed a lot since.
It has, I suppose, yeah, it's evolved a good bit. It was only an idea, I suppose, when the match was played. I was just thinking to myself, if Limerick were in All-Ireland semi-final now, we'd expect a lot more than 7,000 or 8,000 maybe. Galway and Cork have had too many of them, but hurling-wise, I think, look, we touched on it earlier on, about the skill level. The skill level has obviously come up probably an awful lot. The pitches are probably in a lot better condition from looking at that clip, but we'll probably have more access to coaching and coaches, and it probably starts at a younger age. And I think players are coming through at minor level and with a huge skill level, you know, and I think that's been shown when we get into county level.
Paul, let's go to the big game on Sunday, Cork and Galway. Galway really set the hurling world alight with their demolition of Kilkenny, but we know from the past they're always capable of one. Now, is this a different Galway team this time? Can they?
Well, that's the huge question, Pat. If they can put the Leinster final performance behind them, which was fantastic, and this is a different day and different occasion, they don't have to prove to anybody that the Leinster final was a fluke or not a fluke. It's all about a result on Sunday for Galway, I think. And if Galway can just get over Cork anyway, anyhow, it'll be a huge result for them. This Cork team, I've kind of tripped along the championship against Tipperary the first day in the Munster Championship. It was a nice standing game of hurling, kind of a shootout. Wasn't really much physical contact in it. Then the qualifiers got him through. And of course my own county Waterford then seemed to have him on the rack with 5.5 minutes to go. And
should have beaten them, could have beaten them?
Yes, in a word, yes.
Why?
Well, of all teams to put away in the championship matches, Cork. And Cork brought on 3 or 4 subs that didn't weaken the team. That's a huge thing. They have the Colin Naughton come on, Danny Sweetman come on, and it doesn't weaken the team with fresh legs. And they got 6 unanswered points in a spell of about 4 minutes. Great hurling, but Waterford had their chances, and it's a big mistake that Waterford didn't put Cork away.
Gavin, you know a lot of these Galway lads. What will they be focusing on this week? Because they're on a high now after the Kilkenny performance.
This is their final, really. To progress further on this, again, the pressure will come off them straight away going into the final, because Kilkenny or Tip, I think, will go in as favourites. So they won't look any further than this. And they're very conscious of the fact that they have to put in 2 big performances, you know, back to back. And they, like last year, I suppose, with the Cork match, they know they can beat them. They've trained very hard in the last couple of weeks. for one match, and they're not looking past that.
Kieran, they've had a long layoff, Galway, since beating Kilkenny. Is that difficult to keep them prepared mentally and physically?
Yeah, the record shows that it's very hard to overcome. You look at since it happened, even Kilkenny themselves in 2001, their first time dealing with it, lost to Galway. They struggled with it, then they got the handle of it. Waterford struggled with the 6-week layoff. First of all, it has to be said, I think it is unfair. The most there should be a gap is 4 weeks. It's unfair on Galway, and it's unfair on Tip on Sunday week. It should be changed. What happens is, traditionally, teams have struggled their first time dealing with it. Like even Cork in 03 took a replay against Wexford. Tip in 01 took a replay against Wexford when they were superior teams. Even Tip in 08, it took them a year. They lost to Waterford before then taking care of Limerick when they finally got the handle of it. But look, Anthony Cunningham's a bright man. I'm sure he's looked into it. But again, I don't think it's fair.
As a psychologist, do you think these Galway players are mentally strong enough under Cunningham?
I think they're getting
this year?
absolutely stronger. I think one of the things that I like about Galway under Cunningham is why it could be their year is they're not all about this year. He's putting in systems that are going to be, it's not a one big squeeze. One thing that, to me, and again going back to the mindset, is the shape Joe Canning's in.
Yes.
You know, to be honest, I've been involved with teams where we would look at Joe as opposed to Henry Shefflin, and just even the shape he's in, and say, who wants it? Joe wants it this year. Look at the shape he's in. So I think I've been very.
He's been lucky enough as well.
You went to college with him?
He's been lucky with injuries and that, you know. And I think from when he burst onto the scene, from then he's never really had a run of games, you know. And I think he's getting that now, and you can see it in him. He's definitely as good as people say he is. But he's getting a chance now to train with the team, to put in the matches, play the challenge matches. He's just now he's another teammate. In years gone by, he mightn't see the team for a couple of weeks. He was with physios, he was getting this and that. He had a lot of different injuries, and now he's getting the chance to.
How good are Cork, Paul?
That's a tough one to answer, Pat. I don't think there's far down the line as maybe an appearance in an All-Ireland semi-final. But having said that, there won't be any pushover on Sunday. They have experienced players sprinkled in among them now, one or two coming back. They don't have the goal threat of previous Cork teams. Like against Waterford, Paddy O'Sullivan, Pat Cronin and Pat Horgan went missing there for a period in the second half when it was vital, and that's when Waterford got on top. Cork are rebuilding. I think this will probably be the limit of their year this year, but watch out in the next couple of years.
I just think Cork will have learned an awful lot from the Waterford match. I felt like, especially Luke O'Farrell was well on top and full forward, and next thing the ball dried up. You know, there was no ball going in. And I think they will have worked on that in the last couple of weeks. They've a very fast full forward line, and they need to get the ball into them if they're going to do that.
Galway are kind of forcing turnovers out the field more this year. They're working harder. They have a second man in the whole time, kind of forcing teams to.
I read an article by Diarmaid Sullivan, The Rock, during the weekend, and he was worried about the fact that Cork have put pace before physicality.
Well, that's what minor teams are doing. They're putting the opposite around. They're putting physicality before pace or hurling. But I think Cork need pace. I think they're good hurlers, but they need fast ball. And I think the half-back line the last day, Owen Cadigan struggled to centre-back. Tom Kenny had his hands full on Maurice Shanahan, and Sean Oak had his hands full on John Milan. So there was no great direct ball going in. So that's why the Cork full forward line kind of went out of the game. But if Cork can get a ball in over the opposing half-back line, I think the three lads inside are good players.
Kieran, you're from Cork. You work with the Examiner. You meet Cork people every day. Is there a belief amongst Cork people that they can win in All-Ireland this year in hurling?
Yeah, it's funny. I interviewed Donald Cusack during the week, and although Cork are looking at it as being a project, as he said, look, that's up to Jimmy, like the likes of himself. And I interviewed Tom Kenny a couple of weeks ago. They believe that when you're a Cork hurler, you're in the business of winning All Irelands. You might even have a better chance in a couple of years' time, but who's to say that it will come about? So I think the one thing about Galway have a good record against this Cork team in recent years, between the league final in 2010 and 2009, 2011 qualifiers. But a properly prepared Cork team will always feel that they will beat Galway, and I have a sneaky feeling that they're going to do it.
1990 all over again.
So I'm going to you have to get off the fences, Kieran. You've already
I just think just about. Yeah.
It's Cork in one word, lads.
Galway in a tight one.
Galway. 2-1. Kieran, you're outnumbered. Of course, you can watch that game on Sunday between Cork and Galway, as well as the All-Ireland minor semi-final between Dublin and Clare, live on RT1.